Welcome to the series Designing Your Way Forward. In this second episode, if you want people to listen to your ideas, learn to tell the story, we dive into how mastering storytelling and effective communication can amplify your impact and could actually be your greatest leadership tool. Alex, looking back, was there a time you had a design idea that only got traction because of how you presented the story behind it?
I think all of my ideas got traction because of good storytelling. I think that design is equal to good storytelling. Meaning to that is that design is never about, oh, look at this fancy design I did. It is not about that. It is always about, here is the story I built you, and here is based on the story what the outcome may look like, and will be this visual design. And I personally think that in all of my experience, all the time when I, especially on Instagram, where everything, all of the experiments that we're doing needs to have really detailed presentation behind it. This presentation will include all of these detailed storytelling pieces like giving detailed context, showcasing different ideas based on that context, discussing what our opportunities can be, where it can come, whatever. So overall, I think that storytelling is so essential for design that I personally think that all of my ideas were landed based on good storytelling.
And building on that, I'm curious, what mental models or structures do you use when preparing to pitch a design, whether it's to cross-functional peers or senior leadership?
Good question. Overall, it is always a big journey. It is a big piece of iteration in terms of what questions I need always to ask myself and ask the team to build a really good pitch for the idea. And overall, I understood that the best way to do that is always ask really foundational problems. I really like the idea of asking 5 times why user needs this idea, why they need that, and going down to the really foundational of like overall what the essence of the problem. And this always helps me to build this narrative. Additionally to that, for sure, like what are the user's truths, why we need to have it right now, what is the future iterations of it, and generally, especially for the designer, if we're talking about showing it to leadership, is always, first of all, talking in the language that leadership are talking, which is like metrics, and making everything being as simple as possible. So, for example, showcasing a lot before and after, showcasing why after piece is better than before, showcasing what foundational problems we're solving, showcasing really detailed data of our previous experiments, because overall, making all of that hard to understand knowledge to be as simple as possible is this magic that designer can do. And overall, if you can share this idea and all of this, for example, mental models as simple as possible, is always a winning situation, especially if you sell it to leadership.
That is really insightful, and having a clear framework can actually make pitching so much more effective. But as you know, every audience is a little different. You work with engineers, PMs, marketers. How do you adapt your storytelling depending on your audience?
I think that really good storytelling is always adaptable. It is not templated. So overall, if you're talking about engineers, for sure I need to talk language that engineers understand, which means like here is our system, here is our edge cases, here is the clarity of how we can implement that. For sure, I think that one of the big directions that design is going, especially this year and the future, is the idea of design engineers, where I am as a designer, I understand that, for example, the basics of coding and generally how engineers need to implement that. So I also, for example, include all of that developers' specifications and again, collaborating with them, having their own language. If I'm talking about PMs and, for example, leadership, for sure it is what impact it can bring, what trade-offs it may have, like what metrics we may solve, whatever. So simplify a lot of pieces, especially if we're talking about leadership. Leadership are not interested in all of the tons of context that your team is iterating on. They need to have really the summary, and as simple as possible summary of where you were, what you did, why you need that, where you're going, and how you can get there. So overall, I think that, again, you can always shift your story for different audiences, and it is never being a one template for everyone. It is always speaking language of engineers, PMs, and for example, marketers or leadership. It is always different.
That's a really thoughtful approach to adapting your message for different groups. But even with the best intentions, it's easy to stumble when trying to persuade others. And in your personal experience, what do you see as the most common mistakes that designers make when they try to persuade others of their ideas?
I think that the biggest mistakes I saw, especially from working in startups in Ukraine and currently mentoring a lot of junior designers, is that a lot of people are leading with visuals, not with the problems. What I mean by that is that it is much easier to showcase, okay, here is the design I did, here is all the details I visualized, here is for example, 500 screens on Figma that is really hard to digest, but it will showcase that designer worked a lot on this problem. But overall, it doesn't solve anything. People, PMs and leadership, non-designers, needs to have a clear problem, clear context, and clear why we're doing that, and only after showcasing screens, visuals, whatever. I think the best thing is to showcase prototypes that people can really try. That is why, for example, on Instagram we have our own product called Origami, where generally you can build a prototype that looks like a real app. So, for example, leadership can try it on their own. So again, this is the perfect way. And I personally think that sometimes designers are thinking that visuals are the most important, and they're saying, okay, here's 5 examples of visuals without any context. And I feel that, yes, my personal understanding is that always say to yourself that please don't design to impress your peers, design again to solve the problem, to persuade with all of the context you created, and elevate the final result.
That is very helpful. Knowing what to avoid can just be as important as knowing what to do. And I imagine a lot of junior designers struggle with these challenges, especially when they are new and might feel like the least experienced person in the room. How do you coach junior designers or interns to build their voice and confidence in those situations?
I think that the first thing I always tell them is that build trust first, execute after. What I mean by that is that a lot of people, when they join, for example, a new team and they're the most junior, they start to influence without really building a trust, without having one-on-ones with everyone in the team, understanding their pain points, understanding the context, understanding what really team is focusing on right now, where it goes. They start, okay, I understood this product by looking at it, for example, for several days. Here is my huge ideas that really do not relate at all to the team. And these pieces always lose trust. That is why when I coach junior designers, I always tell them, for example, do not afraid to speak up, do not afraid to go to everyone from your team with whom you will work, have one-on-one with them, go take a coffee, speak about some informal stuff, and speak about really what this person understands about this company, what they see as the opportunity, what are the current problems, whatever. So all of that context, first of all, will again change their perception about you, because if they already have a good cup of cappuccino with you, they will completely have a different perspective on you. You will not be a new person to them. And this piece, when you did all of that, first of all, you will have a perfect context about the team. You will have the perfect context about everything. You will have a good trust. And with that, when you go and, for example, share your idea, everyone will know you and everyone will have a different perception of you. And you will be also easier to not be afraid of telling them good ideas, because you are doing that idea based on what they tell you. and based on the patterns that you saw. So I personally think that, again, building trust first and only after that execute, create all of these presentations, and really building this confidence is a good journey to have.
Those are valuable advices. Thank you, Alex, for this quality time. Thanks to our listeners, and join us next time as we continue exploring how treating your career like a product can set you up for long-term impact and growth.
Thank you.